Fate is a tired and hungry guard who spends his days holding a flagpole at the castle wall. His life feels hard and pointless. As he stands there, a group of adventurers passes by, bragging about reaching level 6 after a hunt. Fate feels jealous but knows he can never be like them. His stomach growls loudly, making him feel worse. He thinks about how useless his life and skill, gluttony, seem. His stats are stuck at 1, and his job feels meaningless. Just as his shift is about to end, 3 holy knights show up. They ask if he has done his job right, and Fate nervously nods. The leader throws a few coins on the ground and orders him to pick them up. When Fate kneels, one of the knights steps on his hand and laughs at him. They call him dirty and weak. The leader kicks him when his stomach growls, annoyed by the noise. The female knight insults him, saying his skill is worthless and he only survives because they give him scraps. Fate feels helpless as they mock and hurt him. He knows in this world, people are judged by the skills they're born with, and his skill only brings him suffering. The knights make him kneel in the dirt and call it discipline. But before things get worse, a strong voice interrupts them. It's Lady Roxy Hart, a respected knight known for being kind but firm. She scolds the knights, telling them they should protect people, not harm them. The leader acts like he did nothing wrong but soon leaves with the others. Roxy helps Fate stand up and cleans his injuries with a handkerchief. She tells him kind words before leaving. Later, at a bar, Fate thinks about her kindness but also worries the knights might hurt her because of him. The bartender warns Fate about staying in such a dangerous situation, hinting that it could end badly for him. That night, as Fate walks through the streets, his hunger feels unbearable, a cruel effect of his gluttony skill. While cursing his useless ability, he sees thieves climbing the castle walls. He rushes to warn Roxy but hears fighting and screams that suddenly stop. He spots a wounded thief and uses his spear to strike him down. As the thief dies, Fate is covered in darkness, and a voice tells him his gluttony skill has activated. His stats shoot up to over 100, and he gains 2 new abilities, Identify and Telepathy. Confused but curious, Fate tries to understand what happened. Roxy arrives, worried he might be hurt. Fate can somehow hear her silent thoughts of concern. She thanks him for his bravery and offers him a place in her household. Fate thinks about his choices, stay as a powerless guard or take this chance for a better life. He decides to accept her offer. At home, Fate looks at his new abilities. He realizes telepathy lets him hear thoughts, but gluttony still feels like a mystery. Despite this, he feels hopeful about his future and the strength he now has to fight monsters. The next morning, Fate goes to the market to find a weapon. With only 2 coins, his choices are few. Using his Identify skill, he examines the swords on display. To his surprise, one sword talks to him. The sword introduces itself as Greed and promises to make him stronger if he buys it. Fate is shocked when Greed calls him Gluttony, knowing about his skill. Greed explains they are connected and convinces Fate to buy it. Meanwhile, the trio of knights complains about Roxy offering Fate a position without asking them. The female knight is angry, but the leader reminds her that Roxy's family is powerful and going against her could cause problems. Outside the city, Fate practices with Greed. The sword warns him of danger, and Fate panics as a goblin jumps at him. Suddenly, his reflexes improve, his eyes glow, and he kills the goblin with 1 strike. A voice announces that Gluttony has activated again, giving him more stats and the strength boost skill. Fate keeps fighting goblins, killing hundreds of them with ease. By the end, his stats have skyrocketed to over 500, and his strength is 3 times what it was. Greed teases him, asking if he still feels hungry. Fate realizes his hunger is gone. When he asks why, Greed explains that Gluttony steals stats and abilities from those he defeats. But there's a downside, Fate can't gain experience or level up in the normal way. When Fate asks how Greed knows so much, the sword says they are alike. Fate doesn't fully understand but listens. Just then, some adventurers approach. Greed warns Fate to hide his skill because it breaks the world's rules. Fate realizes this means he must always fight alone. But Greed reassures him. Greed promises to stay by Fate's side no matter what, making him feel braver. Before leaving, Greed suggests that Fate collect the goblin's ears to earn a reward. Fate agrees and ends up getting 3 silver and 80 bronze coins. Excited, he decides to treat himself to a proper meal. On his way back, Fate bumps into a creepy man coming out of a dark alley. A young girl with the man lightly touches Fate's arm, and he hears her silent plea for help. Startled, Fate uses his Identify skill on the man, but the information vanishes immediately. Greed explains that the man has a concealment skill that hides his identity. Greed then asks how Fate plans to help the girl. Determined, Fate quietly follows them. The man takes the girl to a warehouse and chains her to a wall. He mocks her, saying she will soon be handed over to the Holy Knights as their plaything. Fate feels a surge of anger. Greed warns him to be careful since the man is much stronger than him. But Fate refuses to leave the girl behind now that he has the power to fight. Once the man leaves the room, Fate sneaks in. He softly reassures the girl and breaks her chains. He tells her to run, but before they can escape, the man returns. The man laughs at Fate, calling him weak and foolish for trying to act like a hero. Fate smiles at the girl, signaling her to stay calm, and draws Greed to fight. Greed quickly forms a plan. He tells Fate to act scared and trick the man into thinking he's not a threat. Following the plan, Fate pretends to retreat with the girl, making the man overconfident. Then, using nearby crates as a distraction, Fate knocks them over to create an opening. He strikes, grazing the man's cheek. Angry, the man activates a glowing skill on his sword. Greed identifies it as a powerful ability and tells Fate to destroy the weapon. Using the crates for height, Fate leaps and smashes the man's sword before landing a heavy blow. The man, now badly injured, confesses that Hato Vlarik, one of the holy knights who bullied Fate, ordered the girl's kidnapping. After ensuring the man can't hurt anyone else, Fate takes the girl outside. He promises her she's safe now and escorts her back to an orphanage. The nuns thank him for rescuing the girl, Sahara, and Fate is surprised. It's the first time anyone has ever thanked him. Sahara asks about his skill, and Fate shyly says it only makes him hungry. After comforting her, he quietly leaves. Greed congratulates Fate on learning a new skill, the one-handed sword technique. It lets him use secret moves, including striking twice in one attack. Greed then reminds Fate about his new job with Lady Roxy Hart. Realizing he doesn't have proper clothes, Fate decides to prepare for his first day. At a bar, an old man talks about Sir Mason, who recently died fighting a divine dragon in Gallia. The bartender wonders what this means for Roxy's family, as Sir Mason kept the holy knights in line. The old man doubts Roxy can handle the pressure. The next day, Fate arrives at the Holy Knight district dressed neatly. He meets Roxy by the fountain. She smiles and says she's been waiting for him. Fate is struck by her beauty and compliments her, making her blush. She shows him around the estate, stopping at a grave. It belongs to her father, who died fighting a divine dragon 5 days ago. Roxy explains that her family is responsible for dealing with monster threats, and her father died heroically, but the dragon's appearance was unexpected. They are interrupted by Haru, a stern maid and chef, who warns Fate to behave properly. Later, Fate's first task is trimming bushes every day. When Haru calls him to meet Roxy in the garden, Fate feels an intense hunger. He tries to hide it but collapses in front of her. Fate wakes up in his room to find a note from Roxy, telling him to rest for the day. Confused by his growing hunger, he asks Greed for answers. Greed reveals the truth: gluttony feeds on souls. The more he uses it, the stronger he gets, but it also makes him crave more. If Fate doesn't feed, he could starve to death or lose control and turn into a monster. Greed warns that when Fate's hunger reaches its peak, his glowing eyes will give him away. Looking in the mirror, Fate sees his eyes have changed. Worried, he decides to leave the city at night to hunt. Fate finds a group of goblins and notices that his skill freezes them in place. He defeats them easily, but his hunger still lingers. Greed suggests that Fate go to the Hobgoblin Forest for stronger monsters. Fate fights through the hobgoblins, but his hunger doesn't go away. Only after a big hunt does he finally feel full. Greed tells him he'll need to keep hunting to stay in control of his hunger. Suddenly, the ground shakes. Fate hides as a huge Goblin King appears, carrying a human. Greed warns that the Goblin King can heal itself, making it a tough fight. Fate's eyes change again as he prepares for battle. The Goblin King sits down and starts eating the human, giving Fate a chance to climb a tree and attack. He manages to wound the Goblin King but gets distracted when the human victim falls. The Goblin King swings at Fate, but Fate dodges. Greed encourages him to attack. Fate trusts Greed and blocks the monster's hits, then lands a powerful strike that takes down the Goblin King. As the Goblin King falls, Fate's gluttony skill activates, boosting his power. His stats increase greatly, and he gains new abilities. Tired, he sits down, but Greed tells him this is just the start. Greed offers Fate a choice. He can unlock a new form, but it will cost all of his current stats. Fate is unsure, but Greed warns that without this trade, he won't be able to use Greed's help anymore. Fate agrees, and Greed transforms into a magic bow that shoots arrows on its own. Fate tries it out and easily defeats a nearby goblin. Fate then takes the Goblin King's ears and leaves them at Sahara's orphanage. The next day, Fate sees Roxy sneaking out of her house but doesn't recognize her at first. He tells her to stop, thinking she's a thief. When she turns around, Fate realizes it's Roxy and apologizes. Roxy says she's going to town for a secret inspection, but she decides it's like a date and insists Fate escort her. As they walk through the busy streets, Roxy enjoys herself and asks Fate to call her Lexi instead of her real name. They stop at a stall where Roxy admires a red gem, explaining that she likes pretty things. When the merchant offers a discount if Fate buys it for her, Fate gets flustered, and Roxy walks away. Later, Roxy asks Fate if he knows any active warriors. He mentions Minerva and Oliver, but she clarifies that she's looking for warriors who are currently in the field. They overhear a conversation about the recent goblin killings. One man thinks a high-level monster is behind it, while the other says someone left Goblin King ears at an orphanage. Roxy asks for more details, but the men don't know anything else and leave.